is under investigation. Also, before I start today's show, I've got to talk about yesterday's show. Sorry, yesterday I did not realize while I was recording that the screen was like this. I did not realize. And it's terrible. It's an awful experience. I apologize. It sucks when I get the show wrong and I feel bad all day about it. I'm like, oh man, like sometimes I want to go take it down. Like I don't ever really want to take down a show. But yesterday I was like, oh man, that sucks because it just misses something, right? So apologies. And for 1,600 to get mixed up, nuts, right? Darn it. So, I mean, these things happen. So apologies about that. Sorry. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate your forgiveness and we'll move on. But I just wanted to mention that I realized it and I realized it like close to the end of the show, but I was hoping that it was left over from a video being big or something like that. And I thought, oh, that's weird. It's not usually like that. And then I was cutting up the show afterwards and I thought, dummy. Oh, well, these things happen. They do happen. And that's part of kind of doing what I do. So sometimes I mess it up and apologies and we'll move on. Anyway, there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we have to start with the housing situation. Now, I think I've even buried some leads. There's stuff going on with the CO2 that I thought was in my preamble, but I guess it wasn't. And we'll talk about it. There's so much going on. There's so many tabs today. There's almost 70 tabs. So that's a lot. So anyway, we'll start with housing and we'll just see how it goes. First, Jim Murphy says, wow, 5,200 housing units in Edmonton over the next 3 years. That's enough housing units to accommodate 4 days worth of immigration. Job well done. Sunny ways, right? And that it's funny because it's not going to solve the problem at all. But what I'm trying to highlight here is actually Justin Trudeau sidestepping the provinces and going directly to the cities that he controls, right? So there are a lot of Liberal mayors, Liberal and NDP aligned municipal people. And instead of calling Danielle Smith, and Danielle Smith is not very happy about this, and as you'll see later in the show, instead of calling Danielle Smith to make this announcement, she's nowhere to be seen. He's standing with the Sochi, right? And like the mayor of Edmonton, which is, not great. And a big faux pas because Sochi's underneath Danielle Smith. Danielle Smith should have had a call or something like that. So this is campaigning. Justin Trudeau does this quite a lot and it's nothing new and an election's coming, but they're really gearing up early. But the announcement is woefully inadequate. Joe is pointing out what I was just talking about. He's responding to Trudeau's announcement live from Edmonton. We're announcing an agreement to build more homes, blah, blah, blah. Joe says, where's the provincial government? Why are they not involved with their jurisdiction of governance? Mayors exist in his capacity as part of the provincial government. Trudeau Liberals are desperate, irresponsible, and sidestepping respectful scope and hierarchy. Yeah, there's a problem with that, right? And what they're doing is trying to appeal to voters. They're trying to buy votes. They're trying to say, look, we're doing all this great work by, supporting housing and stuff, but they're not actually doing anything that will actually address the housing issue, the price issue, or anything to that effect at all. And they want to distract us by going directly to the municipalities and throwing this kind of money around, right? CBC Watcher points this out, happening not just out west, but also out east. The housing photo op tour continues. Trudeau to make housing announcement in Cape Breton. One of the things that the Liberals are often talking about is how they're not good at communicating their wins. And so the Liberals who are drinking the Kool-Aid every night of Trudeau loyalism are complaining to Trudeau that all the good work that they're doing is going misunderstood by the Canadian public because of those evil bloggers like me, right, who are telling mean stories about their dear leader. Paraphrasing, but roughly, right? But it's funny because they've convinced themselves of something that just isn't true. Like their version of reality, Trudeau's version of reality is the cracked version. They have to expend mental gymnastics in order to align with his version of reality. Here's the real reality asserting itself. The Globe and Mail, no less, says there's no version of reality where supply can be ramped up enough to meet the tidal wave of demand seen over the past few years. There is absolutely no version of reality. None whatsoever. This begins at thehub.ca. It says the housing narrative in Canada is changing. This piece argues that Canada's housing crisis cannot be solved with a singular focus on building more homes. It suggests that Canada should reduce the number of non-permanent residents by 1 million people to ease the demand for housing. Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, we should deport the people who don't belong in Canada. The illegal people who don't belong here should be deported and removed. And then you can start removing the criminals who maybe somehow got paperwork erroneously or because the paperwork was shoddy or whatever. And I think that we could probably get rid of another 1 million people based on just that alone. And then we can start figuring out what the heck to do with the rest of the people after we've slammed the doors shut on more people coming in to live here or to work here, anything like that. Now, one of the other things that's happened is, and this happened in 2018, 1920, I can't remember exactly when this happened, but there was a cranberry farmer who was going to lose the farm because he couldn't work the fields and the temporary foreign workers couldn't come in. I think it was maybe 2020. The temporary foreign workers couldn't come in. The laws were changed. Maybe it was COVID. The COVID laws were changed that they each had to have a rooming house and so on and so forth. It made it really expensive. But this guy was willing to bring them in anyway because otherwise he was going to lose the farm. But then they were held up for other reasons and they couldn't. It must have been 2020. And they were held up for other reasons. And I don't actually remember what happened to the farm. I don't think that I ever got an update on that. But fundamentally, like, there have been situations, well, there needs to be situations where you fix problems like that. Like, you don't just slam the door shut and say, our ideology trumps good business sense type deal. But you can draw it down. You can incentivize, like we used to incentivize when I was in high school, you could go and plant trees. And the stories about people planting trees sounded like a nightmare to me, like an absolute nightmare. But there are people out there who are like, I could go live in Northern Ontario with black flies that I could go have a beer with later. That sounds great. And I was like, why do you want to do? Okay, you want to do that, go nuts. But people could be incentivized is my point into doing that kind of work. And you'd get people to do it, right? And people would be interested in doing it. Like, you can draw up the number of Canadians who are here now and incentivize that work instead of incentivizing foreign workers to do it. Right? And people make the argument, oh, Canadians won't do that work. Canadians won't do textile work, so we sent it to China. Is that a valid argument? I think that's nonsense. I think it's absolute nonsense. I think you could absolutely staff a textile plant. If you can staff a shipping dock, you could staff a textile plant. You could staff a factory. You could staff, if you can.
Prime Minister, when it comes to the housing,
I didn't touch a button. If you can staff better beef, right? If you can staff Toyota, you could staff one of these other production things, like easily. And they make the argument, oh, Canadians won't do this. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Here is Justin Trudeau talking about Canadians benefiting from immigration. And as I've been opining on about, that is not true, but here's Justin Trudeau lying to people about it. I've got data. Before he talks about this, I'll show you the data that we've got. True North Gal says Conference Board of Canada study reveals that in a zero immigration scenario between now and 2040, Canadians would be richer on a per capita basis, and we'd spend less of our provincial budget on healthcare in a zero immigration scenario. So here you've got Table 3 comparing the scenario results in 2040, and it's got on the left-hand side like immigration number, immigration rate, population share, workers per retiree ratio, real GDP, annual real GDP growth, real GDP per capita. So in a real GDP per capita and $2007, I don't know why it's measured in $2007 because we're in 2040, but it says under no immigration scenario, the real GDP per capita is 71,405. In the status quo, so what we're doing now, real GDP per capita per person is 62,901. In a medium immigration scenario, it's 62,348, and in a high immigration, it's 61,628. So any immigration reduces Canadians per capita because it's more people to share the resources with, right? So fewer per person. That's all per capita means. So here's Justin Trudeau. So if knowing the numbers of this Canadian statistics group, who were they again? The Conference Board of Canada. So I don't think that maybe they have an incentive to lie, but I don't see any inherent bias here. They're saying that per capita Canadians will be poorer if we keep the immigration that we've got or increase it at all. And he says immigrants enrich Canada. Here we go.
Prime Minister, when it comes to the housing and rental crisis in this country, we hear a lot of it has to do with the number of new Canadians coming into Canada. What conversations is your government having on that regard?
That's a really great question. And one of the great strengths of Canada is that we are open to immigration from around the world. It strengthens our communities, it grows our economy, and we do a better job of bringing people in and integrating them and having them become...
I just wanted to show you that because he's asked one question and he's answering a different question. Right? The question was...
Prime Minister, when it comes to the housing and rental crisis in this country, we hear a lot of it has to do with the number of new Canadians coming into Canada. What conversations is your government having on that regard?
And he says, oh, everybody loves new immigrants, blah, 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 blah. But they cost a lot of money. Here is Elon Musk, and he's pointing out the strategy in the States is thus. Ian Miles Chong is showing this Fox News headline, 7.2 million illegals entered the U.S. under Biden administration, an amount greater than the population of 36 states. We are bringing in entire cities. And I mean, I think we've probably replaced provinces at this point in time as well. The number of people, foreign people, outnumber full Canadian provinces, and everybody's sitting around like, this immigration seems a little bit high. Yeah, right? So the total number of illegal immigrants who have entered the U.S. under President Biden is larger than almost every American city. Wow. Ian Miles Chong says this is actually insane, and it's by design. Biden is importing so many illegals that it's enough to replace conservative voters in many swing states. Oh. Elon Musk says, I hope the public is waking up to this. Are you? Do you think you are? Do you think that your friends and family are? I don't think that people feel secure enough to talk about immigrants and when I say immigrants, I'm kind of lumping in temporary foreign workers, students, and refugees and illegals. I'm not talking about legal immigrants immigrating to Canada through a legal route. I'm talking about the illegals and the people taking advantage and the people coming here en masse through diploma mills and things like that. That is the problem. And yeah, like we should probably stop immigration fully, full stop, with certain cutouts for people needing to run their businesses and things like that, draw it down, incentivize, and so on. But like we should absolutely 100% change what's going on as a son of immigrants. And I think that immigrants, when done right, could bring value to the country so long as the country had a goal of maintaining unity and not handing the country over to whichever enclave is the loudest, strongest, and most tread upon, I guess. Like, and I don't think that's happening by accident. Like, here's Ian Smith, and he lays it out. He says the migrant issue is not a random phenomenon. It's been paid for and organized by the same Bolshevik actors who have undermined and overthrown every country from Russia in the early 1900s to Venezuela in the 2000s. Make no mistake, the military-aged men are not here for a better life. They're soldiers with nothing to lose who will be activated once their numbers swell to the proper amount. There's no political solution for this. You must acknowledge the elephant in the room and stop pretending that an election is going to turn this around. Now, an election might turn this around. If Trump understands, if Trump can action people, if Trump can say, like, I can stop this and turn the tide on it. But if he comes in and pretends that everything's hunky-dory and like, you know, he stopped the migrants last time. We'll see. Will he build the wall? We'll see. I have no idea. I, too, believe that there is no real electoral path to fixing the problem that we are currently facing. I hope I'm wrong about that. I really do, because I don't want a war. But it doesn't look like a calling up Justin Trudeau. Hey, Justin, could you step down, because it seems like the whole Canadian government is acting in not the best interests of Canadians, and it seems like you're cool with that, so you should probably step down. Blah blah. He's not going to say, "Oh yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for pointing that out. Thanks, Mark. See you later. I'll step down right now." Like, that's not going to happen. Okay, and even if it's not me calling, because I don't think he likes me because I call him names, and somebody like he respected, like Fidel, or, you know, I don't know, some other high end communist, they called him and told him to resign for, you know, Polyev to take over or whatever. I don't think he would. So sorry, I'll get back to this. I hope that I'm wrong about there not being a political solution, but I feel like our elections are too rigged. The population is too docile and complacent, and they don't understand the stakes at a level. They don't understand the stakes. And so there's no, either we comply and go with it, or we say no. And if we say no, there's going to be conflict. And so when you say no, it just matters. The decision then is, how big is this conflict going to get? Anyway, there's no political solution for this. You must acknowledge the elephant in the room and stop pretending that an election is going to turn this around. There will come a day when you will have to make the choice to defend your homeland or submit to tyranny in its final form. This is the uncomfortable truth. Spend your time wisely until then. The day will come, and those who are prepared and brave will be just fine. I don't know about just fine. There are terrors and awful things that happen during war, like terrible, awful things. Let's talk about the Arrive scam stuff, and then we'll talk about censorship. Arrive scam first, though. New Pierre Poilievre calls for Arrive scam Governor General, or GC Strategies, owners to be arrested and dragged to the House of Commons. So this is what the Conservatives want, and a lot of people, I think, are in agreement with them about this. Here's Pierre Poilievre talking about getting GC Strategies in to the House of Commons to testify about what actually went on. Here we go.
For a 5-person company that operates out of the basement of a cottage, for IT services, even though the company admits they don't do IT work. Well, common sense conservatives are calling GC Strategies and its employees to testify under oath at a parliamentary committee. They're refusing. And so we've put forward a motion to have them arrested and physically dragged into the room to explain where our $250 million went. Where's the funds? Yesterday, Liberal MPs started a filibuster. That's a talkathon, talking into the mic, running out the clock to prevent GC Strategies officials from being brought into committee. What have you got to hide, Justin? Why won't you bring in these consultants to explain why you gave them $250 million tax dollars? If you've got nothing to hide, get your MPs out of the way and let us bring them in here.
Well, it's a power play game, and Justin Trudeau will prevent. I mean, there were certain situations where it seemed innocuous and there was a fight over documents and things like that. So everything's a fight, and it's not surprising, but Justin Trudeau is not going to respond to this kind of bait. He's got control of the committee, and that's enough, right? Here's Holly Doan. She's reporting feds at, Public Services and Procurement have sufficient suspicion of wrongdoing in the ArriveCan contracting, testifies Assistant Deputy Minister Catherine Poulin. So yes, there is sufficient suspicion of wrongdoing. That's not surprising considering how upset Larry Brock and Michael Cooper and Michael Barrett are. It's not surprising at all. And will they be held accountable? Probably not. It's not looking good, right? Here's Chuck, and he's sharing a picture of Jagmeet Singh's office out in BC, and Chuck says, "I'll huff and I'll puff, and I'll keep supporting the most corrupt prime minister in history." So it's got Jagmeet as Trudeau's puppet, and there's a whole bunch of other posters and things. I don't know when this was taken, but it's a lot of Jagmeet Singh supporting the current prime minister that's continuing to take Canada down this destructive path. And that's really a shame. Pierre Poilievre, again, is asking how much did the ArriveCam scam cost? And the dodges by Trudeau seem more and more desperate isn't the right word, but it's not hitting right. He knows it. Like, when you're talking to a crowd, and yesterday I can feel after the show that people were like, "Oh man, kind of sucks, man." I do my job best when the show kind of disappears, right? When you hear the talking, you can see it like the way it's supposed to be seen, et cetera, et cetera. So when it's done well, it disappears. But when it sticks out, right? And so you can hear that Trudeau almost can feel that what he's saying is bullshit, and he knows it, and everybody listening to it knows it too. And so he can feel that. He can feel that. I don't know if he listens to that, but I promise he can feel it. Here's Poilievre and Trudeau in the House of Commons.
How can the Prime Minister waste millions of dollars on a Arrive scam when Canadians can't afford to eat, heat, or house themselves? The answer is because the NDP keeps that Prime Minister in power. That's how. And votes consistently in committee to cover up the scandal and shut down investigations. This app was supposed to cost 80 grand, said the Prime Minister. Now it's at least 60 million, but we don't know for sure because of missing documents. What is the full and final cost of Arrive scam?
Here.
Mr. Speaker, I've addressed these questions, but I will highlight that part of the Conservatives' attacks on this situation is because they deeply deplore all the measures we put in to keep Canadians safe during the pandemic. We remember how they gave in to conspiracy theories, spreading anti-vaxxer conspiracies, standing against measures that we needed to put forward to keep Canadians safe. Yes, as we did all those things, we made sure that rules were followed, and any rules that weren't followed, there are consequences and there are investigations ongoing. We will continue to keep Canadian safety at the forefront.
What was the full and final cost of the app?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
He gives the same speech again, but he fumbles too in the same kind of spot, falling over his words. He doesn't believe what he's saying, and that comes through, and he can feel that he's not hitting. Dale says, worst idea ever. This is conservative government would require websites to verify age to watch porn. Dale likes his porn. Keep him coming, you glorious bastard. I'm just kidding. Maybe Dale doesn't like porn, but he doesn't like the idea of having your freedom curtailed. Now, in 2016, the United Kingdom tried to pass laws very similar, talking about access to porn websites and age verification and putting the onus on the website to verify age and so on and so forth. And like there are tools online already to do that. It got passed, but the legislation that forced the porn sites to enable age verification never got passed. So that part never happened. And so this, I feel like they may propose it. It may be a back and forth argument, but I don't know that this is actually going to be something that is implemented, because the slippery slope is obvious to anybody. Because, Google could be a porn site depending on what you search on the images. Twitter, X could be a porn site depending on what you search. Anything really could be a porn site unless you're specifically about like hats or running shoes or something like that. And even then, like Jeepers Creepers, depends on your definition. So here's the City News article smearing Poilievre on this. Conservative government would require websites to verify age to watch porn. Conservative leader Poilievre speaks during a press conference in Vancouver on Thursday. Poilievre says a future conservative government would make it law for porn websites to verify the age of users in order to prevent minors from accessing the content. And here is Kian, and he says, conservatives say they don't support any measures that would allow the imposition of a digital ID or infringe on the privacy of adults and their freedom to access legal content online. The mainstream media is lying again because Trudeau pays them to. So Zachary says, quite astutely, we'll see. Because like I've said, I don't think there's anything that I can say that's going to derail Mr. Poilievre becoming prime minister in the next election. And I don't think there's anything Trudeau can say, because he's not willing to back down on any of his signature taxes or anything like that. So we're barreling into a conservative government. And remains to be seen if they're on the side of Canadians or on the side of the globalists, right? And if the party is on the side of the globalists and Poilievre himself is on the side of mostly Canadians, then is there going to be conflict in the party? How's that all going to play out? So on and so forth. There's a lot of questions. And people will be upset that I say, is Poilievre legitimate? He's been in politics since 2004. Like he was wet behind the ears young. I don't know that he did much else other than go into politics, but it seems like he's loved politics for a long time. So is he working for a globalist, or is he working for himself, et cetera, et cetera? I really honestly don't know. It doesn't seem like he's working for the globalists or the milk cartel. I haven't seen him walking around with 2-liter jugs of milk like Andrew Scheer, right? So maybe, and I want to give the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, I believe the elections are rigged. I believe the parties are corrupt and working for the same globalist overlords, whether they know it or not. The only things that remain to be seen are the details of how much will this leader of this party bend to those whims, because there's going to be pressure and it's not always going to be obvious, right? So it's tough. It's tough. The whole thing is tough. And I mean, like, the politics are what they are. We can't just throw it all out and start again. As much as maybe that should happen, that's not going to happen. So we've got what we've got, right? Moving on, more censorship, and the public health loves me. They love me. I'm sure they love me. The PHAC and public health, etc., are themselves censoring the internet, and Lion Advocacy is pointing this out. He says, unbelievable. Public Health Agency of Canada has tried to censor YouTube content by claiming trademark rights over, I kid you not, the Canadian flag. That's right, folks. If you criticize the government while displaying the maple leaf flag, PHAC will try and shut you down. So yeah, I wonder why my show was flagged, eh? And Lion Advocacy. I don't know that he did I didn't know he did stand up. He says, if I ever do another 5-minute stand up comedy routine at Second City, you can bet your bottom digital dollar that I'll be incorporating a fictional PHAC board meeting bit where the senior leadership decides to launch trademark attacks on Canadians who disagree with federal policy. Honestly, the Canadian flag? Yeah. Don't you use that. That's worthy of censorship, you bigot. No, says Polyev, said today Trudeau has a woke authoritarian agenda, said he opposes the upcoming online harms bill as Trudeau's interpretation of hate speech is speech he hates. Yeah, this is okay. We'll listen to as much of it as makes sense. Here we go.
Polyev, Andrew Lawton, True North. The federal government has said that its online harms bill is imminent. They've said this bill will include, among other things, a ban on so-called online hate speech. As you know, the Conservatives a decade ago repealed Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act, which the Liberals have talked about reintroducing and tried in the last parliamentary term. Will the Conservatives oppose the reintroduction of these provisions and the Liberals' approach to so-called online hate speech?
Yes, we will oppose Justin Trudeau's latest attack on freedom of expression. And I want to ask, what does Justin Trudeau mean when he says the word hate speech? He means speech he hates. So, for example, let's go through some of the things he said is hate speech. Jerry Butts, the PMO puppet master, said that it was hate speech to criticize Trudeau for using the ridiculous term people kind, right? Justin Trudeau said anyone who criticized him during the pandemic was engaging in hate speech. Basically, anybody who disagrees with his radical agenda when it comes to kids, he says is hate speech. He attacked Muslim parents who were protesting against his agenda. Is he going to criminalize those Muslim parents for protecting their children in schools? Go down the list of things that Justin Trudeau disapproves of, and you can imagine all of the things that will be criminalized. And then there becomes the question of who is going to be in charge of determining what is hate speech. Recently, a school board in Ontario banned Anne Frank's books. Okay, so would that be considered hate speech under Justin Trudeau's woke authoritarian agenda? I think it would. So anyone who thinks that speech they don't like is going to be criminalized and therefore the bill should be supported, go through that. Those people should go through the list of their own thoughts that Justin Trudeau considers to be unacceptable views, and you can assume that he will ban all of that as well.
Mr. Polyev?
Yeah. Yep. And if you say a man can't be a woman, oh, ban it, right? That's a paddling, right? Right away, straight to jail. So what are you going to do? The whole thing is stacked against anybody who says reality is real, right? Like that man in a dress over there is a man in a dress, not a woman. Now you've said hate speech. Now your entire video is blocked on YouTube and the internet in Canada because hate speech. Right? And probably a $10,000 fine for misgendering that poor lady over there. Sure. That skirt's too short, sir. Ma'am. David says, I don't see why Polyev needs to do this. He's ahead by 19 points. I don't know. I think he's ahead by more than that. The prime minister is as weak as he's ever been. At some point, enough Canadians might decide Polyev is someone who kicks people when they're down and decides he's not the safe alternative they want. Asked about the online harms bill, Polyev raises Trudeau's past use of blackface. Yeah. I mean, like, if you talk about reality, they don't want you to talk about it, right? Here's Justin Trudeau talking about how online bloggers are trying to disrupt his very carefully curated agreed set of facts that we're all supposed to agree to. Except that the agreed set of facts is insane. Like, men can't be women. That's number one. We have always been at war with Russia and Ukraine, blah, 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 blah. No, these accepted facts that Trudeau's operating on are fictional things made up by globalist puppets. Here's Justin Trudeau.
there is out there a deliberate undermining of mainstream media. There are the conspiracy theorists, there are the social media drivers who are trying to do everything they can to keep people in their little filter bubbles, to prevent people from actually agreeing on a common set of facts, the way, the CBC and CTV, when they were our only sources of news, used to and global used to project across the country at least a common understanding of things.
A common understanding of things. That's what he's opining for, like missing the days of, when they could all lie and push forward a narrative that, as long as they all agreed with it, nobody questioned it, right? And now people are saying, well, hold on a second. This is what this bill says. This is what you said. This is what the outcomes look like, so on and so forth. And people aren't believing the nonsense. So, I mean, the more we know, the less we believe those narrative-driven paid-off networks. Contrarian says Trudeau says his online harms bill is not about internet censorship, it's about protecting kids. Meanwhile, he's fighting parents to take away their rights over their kids. You really can't make this stuff up. So yeah, Prime Minister says the legislation will be focused on protecting youth, not censoring the internet. But if you say, my son is a boy, he has a penis, and they say, you're not allowed to misgender your daughter, that's a big problem, right? Because now you lose, the parent doesn't have the rights. It's the people who are pushing this ideology that have the rights over your kid. And that's crazy town. That's wild. I can't believe we're at 36 minutes and only just getting to the CO2 part. This is in the title. Oh, well. Here is Danielle Smith talking about how Justin Trudeau is not a helper at all, but a delusional adversary to Alberta. I think he's a delusional adversary to the country.
So despite this coming year's
Here's
predicted
Danielle
global
Smith.
economic slowdown, I believe our province is on the cusp of an unprecedented and prolonged energy resource boom, one that will include both hundreds of billions in investment and tens of thousands of new jobs, not only in oil and gas production, but also in designing and building the most advanced emission reduction technologies on Earth. It is going to be an exciting time for our province and for Canada, especially once we finally get a federal government that acts like a strategic partner rather than a delusional adversary.
Great. I like that. I like it. Delusional adversary rolls off the tongue, right? Here is Ivana, and she is sharing this Bonnie Crombie piece where she's asked over and over, are you in support of a carbon tax? The other day I showed you that the Liberals were at, I think it was 32 or something like that, and the Conservatives were at 36. This is nonsense. I live in Ontario. There's nobody who wants to vote for a Liberal Bonnie Crombie who's in support of a carbon tax because, we just got to fight global warming. Here is this interaction.
In your press conference today, you wouldn't take a position on the federal carbon pricing regime. Do you support it? Voters in Ontario will be looking to you to find out what your plan is to do the same thing. Are you supportive of the federal pricing regime? Necessarily feel a consumer carbon tax is necessary to have a serious policy to combat climate change? I'm not asking you to announce any new policies. I'm just simply asking where you stand. I still think it's fair for Ontarians to know where you stand, and I'm not sure why you need more consultation to determine whether you think carbon pricing is effective in mitigating the damages of climate change. And how long do you anticipate you will consult before you determine what your position on a carbon tax is? For Doug Ford to say that you are the queen of the carbon tax, I mean, again, I don't know what more evidence you need to determine whether you support the policy or not. The question I had posed was, how long do you plan to consult before you come to a decision on where you stand? Not until the next election, though, to be clear.
I didn't say that.
So obviously there wasn't anything that, like, it was all just Vasi asking, what do you think about this carbon tax? I think it's funny that Ford is trying to brand Bonnie Crombie as the queen of the carbon tax, but Ford is just fine with, like, he hasn't moved to stop the federal carbon tax in Ontario, right? We're still paying federal carbon tax on home heating, right? On natural gas, are we not? So seems not great. I wonder if that would cut inflation if Doug Ford did that, right? Like, probably, right? So it's probably under 1% if he did that. Maybe not. But still, the whole thing is interesting. And I don't think Bonnie Crombie is nearly as strong as any of those, well, that one poll I showed you indicated. Bruce is responding to Global News. Global News is reporting Federal Emergency Preparedness Minister Harjit Sajjan said this year's wildfire season could be even worse than last year. So they're already gearing up for wildfire season. Wildfire season in Canada? They're already hyping forest fires, folks. So what has the government done to prepare? Did they buy huge water bombers? Hire 10,000 more fire crews using the carbon tax? Protect communities with huge water cannons like ones used at orchards around the outskirts? Oh, none of those things? Shocking. I'm shocked right now. This is me shocked. They haven't done any of those things. So they're not preparing for anything. They want to stoke fear. They want to say, remember last year when you were doing your show and there was smoke in the air and it was kind of hard to like clear your throat? It's going to be even worse this year. And I think that there is something else in the air. There was last year, whenever there were lots of fires, maybe it was last year, maybe it was 22. There was pictures taken of New York and it was all red, and there was speculation of something else being in the fire and something else being like burned. I don't know, not necessarily foreign, whatever, but maybe whatever they're spraying, right? Maybe that's changing the how the smoke looks, and there's some chemicals in there or something like that. But it was all red, and I'm wondering if that's going to happen again. I hope not, but it seems plausible, certainly plausible. Here's Rex, and he's responding. Oh, he says, how many firefighters did the Liberals train and hire? He's responding to the same thing. How many more water bombers did they buy? As usual, Minister of Stolen Valor is spreading fear and hate for his regime. So it's not to say, listen, we think this fire season is going to be bad this year, and so in preparation, we've done these things. The fire season is going to be bad, and the carbon tax is going to work any year now. Just wait. Here is Concerned Citizen, and he's sharing this article, and the article says Spain has admitted to spraying lethal pesticides under chemtrail program. A Spanish meteorologist agency has come out and said that it has taken part in a chemical program to spray its territory with lethal pesticides, silver iodine, lead dioxide, and diametride in order to fight COVID-19. And so, again, take everything with a grain of salt. The internet is a place where anybody could make a headline like this in Canva and put it up and blah, 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 and make it look like this is happening and make people believe it, right? So fake news is a thing. But here's a former premier of British Columbia, and I really like this Twitter account. This Twitter account's great. And he's got all sorts of stuff about the geoengineering, what they're doing to blot out the sun, what they're trying to achieve, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and how they're doing it. And this is something I'd never seen before. This is Real Fishing Life says the Premier of British Columbia, Canada, I don't think this is EB, trying to get him, it's a former Premier, not a current one, trying to get information on geoengineering through the Freedom of Information Act. Only blacked out pages did he receive. Only 20% of the population cannot be hypnotized by the bells and whistles. So he's talking about there are people trying to get information, but the information's spotty at best, and they're being blocked too. So if the premier of a province can't get this information, who can get this information? Here we go.
We have freedom of information in both British Columbia and Canada. So I first inquired from the province because I was relatively close to the people there, so I thought I could probably find out more from it than I might from Canada. However, I did get a quick response from the province saying basically they knew nothing about it and they couldn't help me. It took a long time for me to get a response from the federal government. I requested the information through the Freedom of Information legislation in about 2013, I think it was. And it was 2014 in March when I finally got a response. I got 47 pages, of which 10 were blanked out completely, and 6 or 8 had comments, this information cannot be provided for you under section whatever of the Freedom of Information Act. So I didn't get all the information. There's a lot out there that they haven't told us. But they told me enough that it basically confirmed for me and for all of those that the report was provided to that yes, it was happening. And I think there needs to be more an awareness among the people. The more we talk about chemtrails, what's happening, we're being rained upon with aluminum, barium, strontium, all of that, and the effects, of course, we're feeling here as well. It's recognizing the report from the federal government, Canada, that this will affect geoengineering, as they call it, chemtrails, solar radiation, whatever you want to call it, will affect climate. It's reflecting back the sunlight, but it also recommends or recognizes in the report that it's going to have different effects in different places. The moment governments admit that this is happening because of what it is they're doing, there's a liability, there's a responsibility, and that for them is a problem. So as long as the people are relatively quiet and they're more interested in a football game, a baseball game, or whatever it is today, as I said earlier, create an awareness. And I point to the sky every time I see the chemtrails, and whomever with me will know that those are chemtrails. If I'm not doing it, my wife will certainly do it. Lillian points it out every time to everyone, and that needs to happen. I guess for the most part, the populace still thinks that governments can't do that to us. It's impossible that it's happening. If the government came out, or the bureaucracy or whatever came out and said, we're very involved in genetically modified foods, or we're creating chemtrails, which means that you're being rained upon with aluminum or whatever, that would probably not go over too well. That would be politically very unpopular. You would have an outcry, you would have a protest, you would have a mini revolution.
So he was the premier. I think this was recorded. I don't know when this was recorded, but he was premier 2015. Maybe this was recorded in 2015. He's the 28th premier of British Columbia, and his name is Bill Vandersam. It's on the screen here. Okay, and it's interesting to me because now the government is announcing this. It depends on, he says, well, if you announce this, you're going to be rained upon with aluminum and this and that. If the government said we can protect you from climate change if we just reflect the sun's rays. Kian says Justin Trudeau's government is set to invest in solar modification technology that aim to block out the sun. And Savvy says already happening in Ontario. Yep. And I think it has to do with this headline, and I think it has to do with what Vanderslam, I'm getting it terribly wrong, I'm sorry, Bill is talking about here. And it's very, very concerning because I feel like this unseasonably warm February wouldn't be happening without spraying of our skies the way we're having it sprayed. I can't, there's so much show left, it's unbelievable. Kevin. Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful